These are copies of works by Carlos Castaneda. He's born in South America, professor of anthropology out in California, and his mission in the early 70s was to conduct an anthropological exploration of sorcerers in Mexico. In order to do that, he actually became an apprentice of a real-life sorcerer, learned many things, wrote many books, of which these are only a small sampling. I was a great fan of Castaneda back in the day in the 70s and eagerly awaited the publication of each new volume in his series, which explored his experiences as an apprentice sorcerer, and at the same time introduced a very interesting theory of reality and an interesting set of instructions as to how to modify human behavior given that theory of reality. What I'm going to talk about is a topic that's covered extensively in this book, The Fire from Within, and the topic is in two parts. One is about the art of stalking game as a hunter stalks game. Stalking is a set of instructions that the sorcerers of ancient Mexico taught to their apprentices. And it was very valuable because you learn a lot about human nature. In order to stalk a person, you must learn about them. You must learn their habits, their personality, their preferences, their strengths, their weaknesses. You must learn everything about the subject. And the second part is about petty tyrants. What is a petty tyrant? And why are petty tyrants so useful? When the Spanish conquered Mexico and became its rulers, there were many, many petty tyrants, individuals who had the power of life and death over the population and could order anybody's execution or punishment on a whim with no recourse to courts, laws, customs, just because they felt like it. I don't want to go into too much detail. After all, the book is there. It's available for anyone that wishes to read up on petty tyrants and learn as much as possible about petty tyrants and the right way of behaving when you are in conversation with a petty tyrant. But first, let's go back to stalking. For those who are on the path of knowledge or who consider themselves to be spiritual warriors, this information is very valuable. It gives you instructions on how you can stalk a petty tyrant and, through careful observation of his dynamics, maneuver circumstances in such a way that, first of all, you will learn new skills. You will bring your warriorship and your spiritual quest to a whole new level of competence. And secondly, you will engineer the environment such that the petty tyrant will inevitably meet his demise and will self-destruct. Petty tyrants have a role in society. They serve a function. That is why they are so numerous. For those on the path of knowledge, everything they find on that path and everyone who appears on that path is there for their enjoyment, edification, and instruction. There are no coincidences. There are no accidents. There is only universal law. If we follow that law, by golly, we discover how the universe works. One can find petty tyrants in the workplace, in your family, in school, in government, people of industry, in business, running countries, as pundits who want to give you the advice that you need in order to behave the way they want you to behave. Religious leaders, as real estate moguls, your next door neighbor that just won't leave you alone. Often the petty tyrant shows up as a bully. A bully in the schoolyard, a bully at the presidential podium, a bully in the White House, a bully in the gilded apartment. I'm sure the First Lady knows all about bullies, living with one of the great bullies of the modern era. Petty tyrants obviously have a function in the human social ecosystem, partly because they're so numerous. They must be serving some useful function, or there wouldn't be so many of them and so easy to find. We've had the great good fortune in the last few years to experience a number of petty tyrants up close and personal from the perspective of higher learning or spiritual learning. The petty tyrant's function is to give us the opportunity to overcome an obstacle which is not there of apparently our own choosing, but something which we cannot avoid and must be forced to deal with. Even a virus can show up in the role of a petty tyrant, forcing us to confront things that otherwise we wouldn't be paying any attention to. Of course, the petty tyrant is a role that a person plays, and we've all played the role of petty tyrant in our lives in one form or another. Because the petty tyrant is so preoccupied with his aversion of reality and the world that he has created for himself or herself, to the exclusion of any other consensus reality, the petty tyrant remains oblivious to the machinations of those around him who perceive exactly who he is and what the consequences of his behavior will ultimately be: his own self-demise. The lying, the cheating, the theft, the disregard for the well-being of others is a net they weave that slowly tightens on themselves until their room to maneuver is extinguished and they fall victim to that which they have so freely inflicted on others. Because as petty tyrants go, there's no end to the size of the petty tyrant. Little fish are eaten by the bigger fish, are eaten by the bigger fish, so petty tyrants come into being and pop like soap bubbles when a bigger petty tyrant shows up. And now Mr. Trump is having to kiss the ring of a petty tyrant which eclipses his own puny efforts. A virus, a little strand of DNA clinging to a glob of fat, microscopic, invisible, and it's brought Mr. Trump to the end.